Welcome to Yes, I See Him, a podcast ministry of Your Servant in Christ Ministries. Greetings and welcome to this Monday edition of Yes, I See Him, a podcast ministry brought to you by Your Servant in Christ Ministries. Are you hungry? No, not for a meal or a snack, although it's almost lunchtime here when I'm doing this. Are you hungry for God? Are you desiring to know more of His manifest presence? Then, my friend, you've come to the right place. Because my desire is that you and I will increase in our hunger for and our encountering the manifest presence of God, our loving, all-sufficient God, the God of the Bible, the God who throughout history has loved to encounter His people in intimate ways. One such person, for example, was King David from the Bible. Listen to what he writes in Psalm 27, verse 4. One thing I have desired of the Lord, and that will I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in His temple. And again in verse 8, that same psalm, when you said, "Seek my face," my heart said to you, "Your face will I seek." God's invitation to seek His face is not an invitation to acquire facts about God, like some subject matter. It is an invitation to a relationship of intimacy with the one true and living God. Intimacy has been defined as a close, familiar, and usually affectionate or loving personal relationship with another person. This is an invitation to intimacy because, you see, intimacy is what God made us to have with Him. He made us that way. In Genesis chapter 2, it tells us that God made man in His own image and then spent personal time with him in the garden. God's invitation to intimacy is really an invitation for us to taste in part that original design of God that He had for a relationship between He and us. Not a relationship of knowledge of facts or a relationship of bondage to rules or traditions, but really an experience of His heart. To have an affectionate, mutually loving relationship with Him, to seek His face, implies this kind of personal, up-close understanding. When you look into the eyes of someone that you love, there is a connection of intimacy. Well, God invites you and I to look Him in the eyes. And we can begin today. Would you allow me to relate a personal experience of this kind of intimacy? Back in 2008, I was a part of a group sponsored by the Sentinel Group that does the transformation videos that visited in Brazil several communities that were undergoing transforming revival. One of those locations was a prayer mountain in the city of Belo Horizonte. This was a very high hill in the middle of the city, overlooking the city, where Christians had been coming for some time to seek the Lord and to pray over their city. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, there were people on top of this mountain. And it was a place where the presence of God dwelt. I was a part of this group for about 12 people from various states and countries, and we arrived in the afternoon. There were steps that were carved into the rock of the hill to climb to the top. And along the ascent, there were signs in Portuguese with Bible verses on them. And there were people on the top of the hill with their arms extended in prayer. You could look up and see them there praying over the city. And as we arrived at the top of this hill, the presence of God was so thick that I couldn't even stay on my feet. And I dropped to my knees in worship and intercession for some time. There were a number of people there on the top of the mountain, including a pastor who had been there for 80 days in fasting and prayer. Anytime he needed anything, he just asked the Lord, and somebody would be told by the Lord to bring it there. We were told by people of many stories, stories of angel visitations, stories of amazing healings. I can relate those another time. I don't remember how long we stayed on top of the mountain there, but we left after sunset to return to our retreat center where the Sentinel group was hosting a conference. We all piled into the van, and I was the last one to enter. I sat next to the sliding door. All the others were chit-chatting and talking together. I could not. The presence of God had so impacted me that I simply held on to the handle of the door and hunched over and continued to worship in prayer and intercession and worship. When we got to the conference grounds, there was a meeting scheduled, but I couldn't attend. I just felt like I didn't want to let go of this intimacy. It would have been almost blasphemy to go. It was an experience with the Lord that deeply, deeply impacted me. Even as I relate this story, I'm feeling much of his touch. Now, my friend, I don't know what your situation is. Whatever you're facing, I want you to know this. God's desire is to come and meet with you in personal, intimate relationship. That's his heart. He desires that right now. Let me suggest some ways that we can pray and begin today to seek his face. First of all, spend some time today in meditation on this amazing invitation to have an intimate relationship with God. Go through Psalm 27. Meditate on this passage in Psalm 27. Confess before the Lord any ways that you have ignored his pleas to you to come to him. Any ways that you have allowed the busyness of your life or the disappointments of circumstances keep you from seeking his face. Examine your heart in openness before him. Is intimacy with God the first thing of priority in your life? Ask the Lord to reveal to you his response to that question. Ask the Lord to show you what is hindering your intimacy with him. Confess those things that he speaks to you and turn to him. Say to him as David did, "Your face, O Lord, will I seek." I want to thank you for joining me today on this podcast. I pray that this time might have encouraged you to go deeper in your relationship with our loving Lord. Now, you can find more about our ministry and our heart at our website at yourservantinchristministries.org. And if you have a testimony of how God has encountered you and you've encountered the manifest presence of God in your life, I would not mind, and you wouldn't mind sharing that with me and sharing that on this podcast. I encourage you to email me at steveloopstra@gmail.com. I'd love to have others be encouraged by your experience. This podcast is aired every Monday and every other Thursday. And so I encourage you to like and subscribe if you wish. And again, I want to thank you so much. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining me today for this edition of Yes, I See Him. And until next time, keep on seeking Him. God bless you.